There is something different about this Sunday. Not different in the way that seasons change or calendars flip over, different in the way that something deep inside your chest has been quietly holding its breath for a very long time. And right now, in this moment, it is finally beginning to exhale. You did not stumble onto this message. You were guided here. And if you have learned anything across the years of waiting, of wondering, of carrying questions that had no clean answers, you have learned that nothing that matters ever arrives by accident. You are a chosen one. Not in the way the world throws that phrase around lightly, not as flattery, not as a way to make you feel temporarily better about a hard season. When I say chosen, I mean specifically, deliberately, intentionally set apart. I mean that before your name was ever spoken aloud in any room on this earth, there was already a plan written around you. There was already a thread being woven, a purpose being shaped, calling being prepared that only your exact combination of pain, gift, endurance, and story could fulfill. You were not made to blend in. You were not designed to disappear into the crowd. You were built for something that requires the particular kind of person you have been becoming through every hard year you have lived. And this Sunday is not like other Sundays. I want you to sit with that for just a moment before we go any further. Think about how many Sundays you have moved through on autopilot, getting ready for the week ahead, carrying the weight of what did not happen last week, performing rest without actually finding it. Think about how many times you have sat in a space that was supposed to feel peaceful and instead felt the quiet pressing in on you like something unresolved. You have learned to function inside that tension. You have learned to smile inside it, to show up inside it, to keep going inside it. But functioning is not the same as flourishing, and you have known that for longer than you have been willing to say out loud. Something in you chose today to be still. Something in you said not yet to the plans, not today to the noise, not this time to the people and places that drain more than they restore. That something is not random. That something has a name. It is called preparation, and it is the signature mark of a chosen one entering the final chapter of their waiting season. You are not like everyone around you. I do not say that to inflate your ego. I say it because it is simply true, and because you have spent years trying to figure out why you feel so different, why you cannot quite settle into the life that seems to satisfy the people standing next to you, why something in you keeps reaching for more, not more money, not more status, but more meaning, more alignment, more of the thing you were put here to do. That reaching is not ambition gone wrong. That reaching is the fingerprint of the divine on a life that was never meant to stay small. Let me name 5 signs that only a chosen one will recognize. I want you to feel each one land somewhere specific inside you, because this is not a general message for a general audience. This was written for you, and I want you to feel that with every sentence. The first sign is that your dreams have become sharper, not louder, not more dramatic, sharper. Like someone turned the resolution up on everything your sleeping mind produces. You wake up and the images stay with you longer than they used to. Some of them feel less like dreams and more like briefings. Some of them feel like you were somewhere real, receiving something you are still trying to translate into waking. Language, pay attention to that. Not every dream is a message, but a chosen one in a transitional season does not dream carelessly. The second sign is that ordinary noise has started to feel unbearable in a way you cannot fully explain to anyone around you. Conversations that used to slide past you now feel heavy and misaligned. Environments that used to feel neutral now feel wrong in a way you sense before you can articulate. Social gatherings that should feel like connection leave you more depleted than when you arrived. This is not you becoming difficult or antisocial. This is not a personality flaw or a sign that something is broken in you. This is your frequency rising above what used to be your ceiling, and the dissonance you feel is simply the evidence of that elevation. The third sign is that you have been carrying a restlessness that no single explanation covers. Not depression, though it can wear that face. Not burnout, though it can borrow that costume. It is something older and deeper than either of those, a holy discontent. A deep interior knowing that you were not made for the version of life you have been living, and that something is pressing against the walls of your current season from the outside, waiting to be let in. You have tried to name it anxiety. You have tried to call it overthinking. But it keeps coming back, not because something is wrong with you, but because something real is approaching. The fourth sign is that you keep encountering the same message from completely different directions in a way that defies statistical probability. A stranger says something that echoes exactly what you read 3 days ago in a completely unrelated place. A song lyric suddenly carries a weight it never had before, as if the words were waiting for you to be ready to hear them. A conversation you were not supposed to overhear answers a question you had not yet spoken aloud to anyone. You find yourself in a quiet moment thinking, this keeps happening. This is not coincidence. This is not your brain finding patterns in random noise. This is coordination from a source that does not operate on your timeline, but is absolutely precise in its delivery. The fifth sign is that you have been feeling, perhaps for the first time in years, a fierce and unexplainable desire to protect your peace. Not to explain it, not to defend it to people who will not understand it, simply to guard it. You have started saying no to things that used to feel obligatory. You have started pulling back from spaces that used to feel familiar, but now feel like they belong to a version of you that is already passing. You cannot always justify this to the people around you, and you have stopped trying to. You just know that something sacred is close, and you will not let careless hands come anywhere near it. If even 2 of those 5 landed in a place that felt true, if even one of them made you exhale because someone finally said the thing you have been carrying without a name, then you already know why you are here today, on this particular Sunday, choosing stillness over noise, choosing presence over performance, choosing to show up for a message that has been making its way to you for longer than you realize. I want to speak now to the part of you that has been waiting the longest, not the part that shows up strong for everyone else, not the version of you that keeps it together in public and saves the unraveling for 3 in the morning. I am speaking to the part that has questioned whether the promise was real, whether the calling was real, whether you imagined the whole thing and everyone else was right when they moved on. Without you, that part of you deserves to hear this clearly. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not a case that fell through the cracks of heaven's administration. You are a chosen one who has been in deep and specific preparation, and the preparation, the part that required the silence, the stripping away, the long years of becoming, that part is now complete. This Sunday is not ordinary, and neither are you. Heaven did not say soon, heaven said now. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that chosen ones carry that nobody ever talks about honestly. It is not the exhaustion of laziness. It is not the exhaustion of someone who has not tried hard enough or believed big enough or prayed with enough consistency. It is the exhaustion of someone who has been carrying something heavy across a very long distance without a clear signal of when the road ends. And what makes it harder is that most of the people around you cannot see the weight because you have become so skilled at carrying it quietly that it looks from the outside like you are simply walking. I want to name what you are feeling right now, not the surface version of it, the real version. The version that lives underneath the composed face you show the world. You have been feeling waves of grief that arrive without warning and without obvious cause. You could be in the middle of a perfectly ordinary moment, driving somewhere familiar, standing in a grocery aisle, watching other people laugh at something light. And suddenly, a wave moves through you that has nothing to do with what is happening in front of you. It is grief for something you cannot fully name. It is grief for a version of your life that has not arrived yet. It is grief for the years that passed while you were waiting for things to finally align. And the ache of that is real and it is valid, and it does not mean you have lost faith. It means you are human, and you have been holding on for a very long time. The second thing you have been feeling is a growing sense of heaviness around places and people that used to feel like home. Spaces that were once comfortable now feel like they belong to a chapter that is quietly closing. People you have known for years suddenly feel like strangers who are moving at a frequency you can no longer quite match. You sit in rooms where you used to feel at ease and now feel like you are watching the scene from slightly outside of it, like the glass between you and the familiar has thickened without anyone noticing. This is disorienting. It can make you feel like something is wrong with you, like you are pulling away from the very people and places that are supposed to anchor you. But what is actually happening is not withdrawal. What is happening is realignment. Your spirit is beginning to recognize what belongs to the next season and what belongs to the one that is ending. And the discomfort you feel is simply the honest friction of that transition. The third thing you have been experiencing is a recurring dream or vision, sometimes literal, sometimes more of a feeling of a door that has not yet opened. You have stood in front of it more than once in your waking imagination. Sometimes it appears in your sleep as an actual door, large and quiet, set into a wall you cannot see around. And every time you reach for it, or you wait for it, and it remains closed. Not locked in a hostile way, closed in a way that feels like timing rather than refusal. You have been asking yourself whether the door is real, whether what is on the other side is actually what you believe it to be, whether you have the right address, so to speak, or whether you have been waiting at the wrong threshold entirely. I want to tell you something about that door. It is real, and the fact that it has not opened yet is not a sign that it will not. It is a sign that the person standing in front of it has been being prepared to walk through it without stumbling on the other side. The fourth thing is this: you keep receiving the same message from completely different sources, and it is becoming impossible to dismiss as coincidence. A phrase you heard last week appears again in a completely unrelated conversation this week. A theme surfaces in 3 different places within the same 48 hours. Something you were thinking about privately shows up in something you read, as though the words were written specifically in response to your unspoken question. You have been trying to be reasonable about this. You have been trying not to read too much into things because you have trained yourself to be careful with hope. But the pattern is too consistent to be random, and somewhere underneath your caution, you already know that. Now I want to speak about the things that the waiting has actually cost you. Not to reopen wounds carelessly, but because you deserve to have someone acknowledge the real price tag of a long season before they ask you to see it differently. The sleepless nights are real. The nights when you turn the same question over and over in the dark, trying to find a new angle that might finally produce a different answer. Those nights were real, and they were hard, and they cost you something. The loneliness is real, not just the loneliness of being physically alone, but the specific loneliness of being in a room full of people and still feeling like no one. In that room quite speaks your language. The feeling that you must be wrong about yourself is real. The moments when the waiting stretched long enough that you started to wonder whether the whole vision was something you had invented to protect yourself from the simpler truth that maybe nothing special was coming. Those moments happened, and they left marks. You have felt misunderstood in ways that are too layered to explain in a single conversation. You have made yourself smaller in spaces where you sensed your full size would not be welcome. You have smiled through announcements of other people's breakthroughs, and then gone home and sat quietly with a feeling you were not entirely proud of, a mixture of genuine happiness for them and a private ache that asked when and whether your turn was real, and what you were supposed to do with another season of watching from the edges. I am not going to rush past that. I am going to sit here with you in it for a moment, because that pain deserves to be witnessed before it is reframed. You have not been overlooked in the way that word usually feels. Overlooked feels like a mistake, like someone forgot to include you, like you fell off a list that everyone else made it onto. But what has actually been happening to you is something entirely different. You have been positioned. There is a distinction between those two experiences that changes everything once you can feel it rather than just understand it intellectually. When something is overlooked, it is because it was not seen. When something is positioned, it is because it was seen so completely, so specifically, that it required a particular placement, a particular angle, a particular season, a particular set of conditions, before it could do what it was designed to do. A seed in the ground is not overlooked. It is positioned. It is in the exact environment it needs to be in, to become what it was made to become. And the ground does not apologize to the seed for the darkness. The darkness is not punishment. The darkness is the condition. You have not been forgotten. You have been positioned with a precision that your current vantage point does not yet give you the height to fully see. You are not being punished by the silence. You are being protected by it. You are not being withheld from your purpose. You are being prepared for a level of it that an earlier version of you would not have been able to sustain. Every year that felt like nothing was happening was a year that something was being built in you that cannot be rushed, cannot be faked, and cannot be bought by someone who has not been through what you have been through. If you are still here, still showing up, still choosing to believe even when belief costs you something, then you are not someone who is waiting for a breakthrough. You are someone who is already inside one, standing in the part of it that has not yet become visible. Type the words "I see it" in the comments if you recognize yourself in what I just said. Before we go any further, I want to give you something practical. Not a concept to think about, not a framework to admire from a distance. Something you can actually do today, in the next few minutes, in whatever space you are sitting in right now. Because one of the things that chosen ones struggle with most during a long waiting season is the feeling of helplessness. The sense that everything meaningful is happening somewhere out there in the future, and all you can do in the present is endure. I want to disrupt that feeling right now by putting something real and actionable directly into your hands. This practice is called the 3-minute threshold protocol. It takes almost no time. It requires no special equipment, no particular environment, no prior experience with meditation or spirituality. It works whether you are sitting in a quiet room or parked in a car outside a building you are not ready to walk into yet. It works whether you feel spiritually open right now or whether you feel completely dried out and are showing up here on something closer to fumes than faith. The only requirement is that you are willing to be honest for 3 minutes. Here is how it works. The first step is what I call the grateful release. I want you to close your eyes for just a moment, and I want you to think of one thing, just one, that you are genuinely grateful did not happen. Not the things you are thankful for in the conventional sense, not the blessings that arrived. I am asking for something different. I am asking you to identify one specific door that closed, one specific relationship that ended, one specific opportunity that fell through, one specific version of your future that did not materialize, and to find the honest gratitude inside that closed door. Maybe it is a job you did not get that would have kept you locked in the wrong city. Maybe it is a relationship that ended in a way that felt like devastation at the time, but quietly freed you for something your heart was already moving toward. Maybe it is a plan you made with great confidence that collapsed before it started, and you have never fully understood why, but somewhere in the quiet part of you there is a knowing that the collapse was protective rather than punitive. Find that thing, sit with it for 30 seconds, and let yourself feel, even if it is small and tentative, The gratitude for the no that was actually shielding you from a yes that would have cost you more than you could see at the time. That gratitude is not denial. That gratitude is not spiritual bypassing. That gratitude is the evidence that you are beginning to see your story from a higher vantage point than the one you were standing on when the door closed. The second step is what I call the now declaration. This is a spoken statement, and I want you to actually say it out loud if you are in a space where that is possible. If you cannot speak it aloud, say it with full intention in the interior of your mind. The declaration is this: I am not waiting for my life to begin. My life is already in motion, and what is coming is not a replacement for where I am, it is the expansion of it. Say that again if you need to. Feel the difference between that statement and the one your mind has been defaulting to. The default statement that most chosen ones carry through a long season sounds something like, when this changes, then I will be okay. When the breakthrough comes, then I will be able to breathe. When the door opens, then my real life can start. That when then structure places your entire sense of aliveness somewhere outside the present moment, in a future you cannot yet touch. And it quietly trains you to sleepwalk through the present because the present feels like it does not count yet. The now declaration interrupts that pattern. It does not ask you to pretend that everything is already perfect. It does not ask you to perform a contentment you do not feel. It simply asks you to acknowledge that you are alive right now, that your story is moving right now, that the preparation happening in you right now is not a waste of present tense living. It is the substance of it. The third step is the one that opens something I want to walk you into over the next few minutes of this message. It is 7 minutes of intentional silence. Not sleep, not distraction, not background noise while you scroll through something on a screen. Actual silence with your eyes closed, with your breathing slow and deliberate, with your attention resting gently on the space just behind your thoughts rather than on the thoughts themselves. 7 minutes, that is all. I know that sounds simple, and I know that for many of you, those 7 minutes will feel like the hardest thing on this list, because a mind that has been running at high alert for a long season does not quiet easily. A mind that has been problem-solving and vigilant and braced for the next difficulty does not simply set that down because you decided it should. I understand that, and I want to tell you that the resistance you feel toward those 7 minutes is not a character flaw. It is evidence of exactly how much your nervous system has been carrying. But there is something that happens in those 7 minutes that I want you to experience for yourself before I explain it. Because the explanation will mean more after the experience than before it. So I am going to ask you to hold that third step, those 7 minutes, as an intention for before this message ends. And in the next section, I am going to tell you exactly why 7 minutes matters and what is actually happening inside your brain during that time, in a way that is going to connect the spiritual reality you have been living with the scientific reality that confirms it. Because here is what I want you to understand before we get there. The feeling you have been chasing, the clarity, the calm, the sense of being fully present in your own life rather than watching it from a slight remove, that feeling is not exclusively a spiritual experience. It has a neurological signature. It has a frequency. And that frequency is not foreign to you. It is not something you need to acquire from the outside. It is something that already exists inside your brain that has simply been suppressed by the sustained stress of a long and demanding season. You were built for that frequency, and we are about to talk about how to return to it. There is a reason chosen ones feel things more deeply than the people around them. There is a reason your sensitivity has always felt like both your greatest gift and your most exposed nerve. There is a reason you pick up on things in a room before anyone else names them, why you sense shifts in energy before they become visible, why you carry an awareness of what is underneath the surface of conversations and situations that other people seem to move through without noticing. You have probably spent a significant portion of your life wondering whether that depth was a liability, whether you were simply too much, too sensitive, too tuned into a signal that nobody else around you seemed to be receiving. I want to tell you now that what you have been experiencing is not a malfunction. It is a frequency. Researchers who study the brain, specifically neuroscientists who have spent decades mapping the relationship between mental states and measurable electrical activity, have identified something that connects directly to what you have been living. Chosen ones carry a specific internal frequency, and science has a name for it. They call it gamma. Gamma brainwaves operate at the highest frequency of any measurable brain state. They are associated with peak clarity, with sudden insight, with the kind of integrative thinking that pulls together information from across the entire brain and produces what researchers describe as moments of breakthrough understanding. They are the waves that fire during what scientists call eureka moments, those instants when something that was previously fragmented suddenly assembles itself into a clear and coherent picture. They are the waves that appear in the brains of people operating at the highest levels of creativity, compassion, and perceptual awareness. And then there is theta. Theta brainwaves operate at a slower frequency, between 4 and 8 cycles per second, and they are the waves associated with deep learning, with creative flow, with the kind of open, receptive state where new information does not just enter the mind but actually integrates into it. Theta is the dominant frequency in the brains of young children, which is one of the reasons children learn new languages and absorb new skills with an ease that adults have largely lost access to. It is also the frequency that appears during deep meditation, during the moments just before sleep when the boundary between conscious and subconscious thinking becomes permeable, and during prayer that moves beyond words into something quieter and more receptive. Here is what the research has shown, and why it matters for you specifically. In adults who are under sustained stress, adults who have been in a prolonged season of uncertainty, of vigilance, of carrying weight without clear resolution, both gamma and theta activity become suppressed. The brain, in its effort to manage ongoing demands, defaults to the higher alert frequencies of beta and high beta. Those frequencies are useful for managing immediate problems. They are the frequencies of doing, of reacting, of keeping things together. But they come at a cost. When the brain is locked in those higher alert states for extended periods, the deeper frequencies, the ones associated with creativity, with insight, with spiritual receptivity, with the kind of intuitive knowing that chosen ones are specifically gifted with, those frequencies go quiet. This is why a long waiting season does not just feel hard emotionally. It actually changes the way your brain is operating. It is why your creativity may have felt muted lately, why inspiration feels harder to access than it used to, why prayer sometimes feels like you are speaking into a room where the acoustics have changed. It is not a crisis of faith. It is a crisis of frequency, and frequency can be restored. This is the discovery that a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers dedicated more than 30 years of his life to understanding. Trained at MIT and connected through his research to work done in collaboration with NASA, Dr. Rivers spent decades studying what he came to call the frequency signature of high-performing minds, the specific brainwave patterns that separated people who consistently accessed breakthrough, thinking, creative insight, and what he described as elevated intuitive awareness from those who struggled to access those states even when they consciously wanted to. What he found, after years of research and thousands of hours of data, was that the difference was not intelligence. It was not discipline. It was not even effort. The difference was frequency access, and frequency access could be deliberately restored. The tool he developed from that research is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio program built on a principle called brainwave entrainment, the well-documented neurological phenomenon by which the brain, when exposed to specific sound frequencies delivered in a precise pattern, will naturally begin to synchronize its own electrical activity to match those frequencies. Using a combination of binaural beats and isochronic tones calibrated to guide the brain gently from its default alert state down into theta and toward gamma, the genius wave creates the neurological conditions for exactly the kind of insight, clarity, and receptive awareness that you have been missing during your long season of survival mode functioning. 7 minutes. That is all it takes. Not because 7 minutes is a magic number invented for marketing purposes, but because the research showed that 7 minutes is the threshold at which the brain's entrainment response becomes stable and self-sustaining. Less than that, and the shift is too shallow to hold. More than that at the beginning, and the contrast between the entrained state and the default state can feel disorienting rather than restorative. 7 minutes is the precise window, and it connects directly to the 7 minutes of intentional silence I asked you to hold as an intention a few moments ago. I want to share something with you that was shared with me. A woman named Maya had been in her own long waiting season, 18 months of disrupted sleep, of a career that felt stalled, of a faith that she described as present but distant, like a signal she could sense but not quite tune into clearly. She started using the genius wave not because she expected dramatic results, but because she was tired enough to try, something she would not normally have considered. She told me that on the third morning after beginning, she woke up differently, not dramatically, not with visions or revelations. She simply woke up, and for the first time in over a year, her first thought was not about what she was afraid of. Her first thought was a solution to something she had been stuck on for months. And the week after that, the phone call she had been waiting for, the one that shifted the trajectory of her work in the direction she had been believing for, arrived. I know some of you are thinking that $39 is not a small amount when you are already in a season of financial strain. I want to acknowledge that honestly rather than bypass it. Your financial caution is not a lack of faith. It is wisdom, and it deserves to be respected rather than manipulated. What I will say is this: the Genius Wave normally carries a price of $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below this video, it is available today for $39, and it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means you have 3 full months to experience it, to sit with it, to let it work. And if at the end of that time it has not delivered something real and tangible, you receive every dollar back without question. Please hear this clearly. Only purchase through the single link in the pinned comment below. There are imitation products using similar language that will not deliver what the original research produced. The link below this video is the only verified source, and it is the only one I am willing to direct you toward. This offer at $39 is not permanent. The pricing window is limited, and when it closes, it closes. I am not saying that to create pressure. I am saying it because if this is a yes for you, if something in you recognized itself in the description of what the Genius Wave addresses, then the time to act on that recognition is now, not after the window has passed. There is something I want to say before we move forward, and I need you to stay with me here even if it gets uncomfortable for a moment. What you just heard about the Genius Wave, the science, the frequency, the possibility of restoration, I want that to land in the right place inside you, not as a transaction, not as a product pitch that you either accept or dismiss, but as a confirmation of something you have already sensed about yourself for a long time, which is that the way you experience the world, the depth at which you feel things, the frequency at which you operate when you are fully alive and fully aligned, that is not ordinary. And the fact that a long season of difficulty has muted it does not mean it is gone. It means it is waiting to be reclaimed. Hold that. We will come back to it. But right now, I need to sit with you in something harder. Because before we talk about what is coming, We owe honest acknowledgement to what the waiting has taken. Not what it has given you, we will get there. And the gifts are real, but what it has taken. What the years of holding on, of not yet, of almost and not quite, have actually removed from your life in ways that deserve to be named clearly, and without the rush to reframe them into something more comfortable. The waiting has taken time, and time is the one resource that does not refund itself. The years you spent in a season that felt suspended, that felt like treading water while other people were swimming toward their destinations, those years were real years. They were years of your one life. And there is a grief in that which is legitimate and which does not dissolve simply because purpose is being revealed on the other side of it. You are allowed to grieve the time. You are allowed to feel the weight of it without immediately converting that weight into a lesson. You are allowed to sit inside the honest acknowledgement that something was lost, that the calendar moved whether you were ready for it to or not, and that no amount of reframing will give those specific days and months and years back to you in the form they originally held. The waiting has taken relationships that might have been. There are connections that did not form because you were not in the right place at the right time, not geographically, but internally. There are friendships that might have deepened if you had not been so depleted, so guarded, so consumed by the interior work of simply surviving a long and demanding season. There are relationships you watch thin out and eventually disappear not because of any dramatic falling out, but simply because the sustained weight of your waiting season left you with less to give than those relationships required, and the gap eventually became too wide to bridge. You did not fail those relationships. You were in a season that required more of you internally than you had left over to give externally. But you lost them nonetheless, and the loss is real, and it sits in you as a particular kind of quiet ache that does not always have a name. There are people who knew you before the long season began who would not fully recognize the version of you that exists now. Not because you have become less, but because you have become more guarded, more interior, more careful with the parts of yourself that used to move through the world more freely. You have built walls that were necessary and protective, and probably saved you from certain kinds of additional pain. But walls do not distinguish between what they keep out and what they keep in. And some of the warmth, some of the openness, some of the ease with which you used to connect, that got caught on the inside of the walls too. And you have missed it. Not always consciously, but in the quiet moments when you notice that intimacy feels harder than it used to, that trust requires more evidence than it once did, that the simple act of letting someone see you fully is something you now approach with a caution that was not always there. The waiting has taken career ground that you will have to work to recover. There are opportunities that had a window, and the window closed while you were still in the middle of figuring out how to show up for them. There are versions of your professional life that were possible at 30 that will require a different path at 35 or 40 or 50, not because the destination has changed, but because the road there has lengthened in ways you did not choose. You have watched people you started alongside move further ahead, and you have had to do the internal work of separating genuine celebration for them from the private ache of wondering why the gap exists and whether it will ever close. That internal work is exhausting in a way that is invisible to everyone watching you perform it. Nobody sees the effort it takes to applaud someone else's arrival when your own departure has been delayed this long. The waiting has taken your freedom with your own dreams. There was a version of you, younger, less bruised, less acquainted with disappointment, who spoke your vision out loud without calculating the risk first, who told people what you believed was coming without bracing for the look on their face when it did not arrive on the timeline you described. The waiting taught you to hold your dreams more privately, more carefully, more protectively, which sounds like wisdom but sometimes feels like a cage. You have learned to want things quietly. You have learned to hope in a register that other people cannot hear, because the alternative, hoping loudly, and having it witnessed when the hope does not immediately materialize, became a cost you were no longer willing to pay. And the waiting has taken, perhaps most painfully, chunks of your trust in yourself. The longer a promise is delayed, the more the mind begins to turn inward and ask what role you played in the delay. Whether you missed a step, whether you misheard the calling, whether the whole architecture of belief you built your endurance on was constructed from something real or from something you needed to be real in order to get through a season that was otherwise unbearable. That self-questioning is not weakness. It is what happens to honest, intelligent people when the gap between promise and fulfillment stretches long enough to become its own kind of evidence against itself. And the erosion of self-trust is one of the most quietly devastating costs of a long waiting season, because it does not announce itself dramatically. It simply makes you smaller, more hesitant, more likely to defer to the opinions of others in spaces where you once moved with a confidence that felt natural rather than performed. I want you to sit in all of that for a moment without rushing past it. I want you to let the full weight of what the waiting has cost you be acknowledged in this space before anything else is said. Because the people who have been telling you to be grateful, to count your blessings, to focus on what you have rather than what you have lost, they are not wrong exactly, but they have been skipping a step. And the step they have been skipping is the one where someone simply sits with you in the honest weight of it and says, I see what this has cost you. I see that the price was real. I see that you have been paying it for a long time, and that paying it has changed you in ways that are not all gain. You have paid that price faithfully and without much acknowledgement, and it is honored here. Now let me tell you about someone who understands that price in a way that few voices in history can match. Think about Joseph, not the Joseph of the coat of many colors standing before Pharaoh, not the Joseph of reunion and restoration. That ending comes later, and we will not rush to it. I want you to sit with the Joseph who was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, the ones who were supposed to be his people, his protection, his home. The Joseph who was sold to strangers, who traveled to a country where no one knew his name or his story, who served faithfully in Potiphar's house only to be falsely accused of something he did not do, who went from faithful service directly into imprisonment through no fault of his own, who interpreted a dream correctly for a fellow prisoner and asked for one single thing in return. Remember me, mention me to Pharaoh, help me get out of here, and was forgotten for 2 full years after the man walked free. 2 full years of correct behavior producing no visible result. 2 years of sitting in a cell that was not his fault, in a country that was not his home, separated from everyone who had ever known him before the pit opened beneath him, carrying a dream that God had given him as a teenager that now, in this prison, must have felt like the cruelest possible joke the universe could have arranged. I am not going to resolve that for you yet. I am not going to jump to the morning when Pharaoh dreamed and everything changed, because you are not there yet. And you deserve company in the part of the story you are actually living, not just in the part that makes the ending make sense. The middle of Joseph's story was not a footnote. It was years. It was real, sustained, unresolved years of faithfulness that appeared to produce nothing. You are in those years, and they are hard in a way that the ending, when it finally arrives, will not entirely erase. The hard part leaves a watermark. And that watermark is not a sign of damage. It is a sign of depth. It is the mark of someone who stayed when staying was the hardest possible choice, and who is still here, still present, still willing to receive what is next. You have paid a real price for this season. That price is seen. That price is honored, and it is not being wasted. There is a word I want to give you today that most people in your life will never hand you. Because most people in your life are operating entirely inside a single understanding of time. The understanding most people carry is this: time is a line. It moves in one direction at one speed, and every moment that passes is a moment that is gone. Under this understanding, delay is always loss. Waiting is always waste. Every year that did not produce the visible result you were believing for is a year subtracted from your total, a deficit in the ledger of your life that you will spend the rest of your days trying to make up. Under this understanding, you are behind. And the feeling of being behind is not just uncomfortable. It is a quiet form of accusation that follows you through every ordinary day, whispering that you have already lost ground you will never recover. But there is an older understanding of time, one that predates the clock, predates the calendar, predates the entire modern architecture of schedules and deadlines and productivity metrics that the world has built its sense of meaning around. And that older understanding says something entirely different about the season you have been in. The ancient Greeks had two separate words for time, and the distinction between them is one of the most important things I will say to you today. The first word was chronos. Chronos is the time you already know, sequential, measurable, the kind of time that moves in minutes and hours and years and does not care about meaning or readiness or divine intention. Chronos is the time on your phone screen. It is the time that has been passing while you waited. It is the time that your mind has been using to calculate how far behind you are, how many years have gone, how much ground remains to be recovered. The second word was kairos, and kairos is something entirely different. Kairos is not measured in minutes. It cannot be tracked on a calendar. Kairos is the appointed moment, the moment that arrives not according to the clock but according to readiness, according to alignment, according to a precision that operates completely outside the logic of sequential time. Kairos is the moment when everything that has been in preparation suddenly converges. When the person who has been in the making is finally standing in the exact intersection where their story, their preparation, and their purpose all arrive at the same point simultaneously. You have been measuring your waiting in chronos. You have been counting the years in clock time, in calendar time, in the time that moves indifferently regardless of what it carries or what it costs. And measuring a kairos season in chronos units is like trying to measure the depth of the ocean in miles per hour. The instrument was not designed for what you are trying to measure. The gap you have been calculating between where you are and where you believed you would be by now, that gap is a chronos calculation applied to a kairos reality. And it has been producing a distortion that has made the season feel longer and more punishing than it actually is. This is not the edge of your breakthrough. You are already inside it. The kairos moment does not announce itself the way chronos events do. It does not send a calendar invitation. It does not arrive with obvious fanfare or with the kind of external evidence that your rational mind would find satisfying. It arrives as a shift, internal first, then external. It arrives as a knowing before the evidence assembles itself. It arrives in moments exactly like this one, where something in you that has been braced for a very long time begins, almost imperceptibly, to release. Now I want to give you a second concept, and I want you to feel it rather than simply understand it intellectually. There is a Hebrew word, kava. It is typically translated in English as the word wait, but that translation is so inadequate that it borders on misleading. Because kava does not mean to sit passively in a posture of suspension, doing nothing, going nowhere, simply enduring the absence of what you are waiting for. The literal root of the word describes the action of twisting or braiding cords together, the process by which individual strands of material, each one relatively weak on its own, are wound together under tension to create something with a tensile strength that none of the individual strands possessed alone. When the ancient texts use kava in the context of waiting on divine timing, they are not describing passivity. They are describing a process. They are saying that what is happening in you during the season that looks like nothing from the outside is actually a braiding, a weaving together of strand after strand of experience, of endurance, of character, of capacity, of wisdom that only comes from having been through specific things in a specific sequence. Every year that felt like it produced nothing was a strand being added to the cord. Every loss that left a mark was a strand. Every night you stayed when leaving would have been easier was a strand. Every time you chose to believe when belief cost you something real was a strand. And the cord that has been forming in you through all of those years of waiting, that cord does not snap. It does not fray at the first sign of pressure. It holds weight that no single strand could have held alone. You have not been delayed. You have been braided. You have been assembled under tension into something with a strength that the earlier version of you, the one who wanted the breakthrough to come sooner, would not have been able to carry without being undone by it. Now I want to speak about the door season, because I believe with everything in me that you are standing in it right now. The door season is a specific phase that follows the long interior preparation. It is the phase when what was being built in secret begins to have visible expression. But here is what most people do not understand about the door season. The doors do not arrive with obvious labels. They do not come marked with signs that say this one is yours, walk through here, your breakthrough is on the other side. They arrive quietly. They arrive in moments that look ordinary from the outside. They arrive as an invitation that requires discernment to recognize, because not every open door in the door season is the right door, and only someone who has been through the preparation has the interior clarity to tell the difference. The distinguishing mark of a door that belongs to your Kairos moment is not its size. It is not how impressive it looks from the outside. The distinguishing mark is the peace that accompanies it. Not the excitement. Excitement can attach itself to the wrong doors with remarkable enthusiasm. Not the logic. Logic can construct a convincing argument for walking through a door that was never meant for you. The mark is the peace, the deep, quiet, settled sense that this aligns with something at a level beneath strategy and calculation. Not every door that opens carries that peace, but the door that belongs to your appointed time, your Kairos intersection, will carry it, and you will know it. Not because someone told you what to look for, but because after everything you have been through to get to this moment, you have been made into someone who can feel the difference between a door that glitters and a door that is genuinely open. What God has appointed, no delay has the power to cancel. The seasons that felt like setbacks were not subtracting from your Kairos moment. They were adding to the preparation that makes your Kairos moment sustainable rather than merely spectacular. Because there is a version of breakthrough that arrives before the person is ready for it, and it does not hold. It collapses under its own weight because the internal structure was not yet built to support it. And then there is the version that arrives exactly when the person has been braided into the kind of strength that can carry what the breakthrough brings with it. You are the second version. You have been the second version all along. The preparation was not a punishment for something you did wrong. It was the evidence of how significant what is coming actually is. Small things do not require long preparations. The preparation you have been through is proportional to the weight of what you are about to carry. This Sunday is not an ordinary Sunday because you are not an ordinary person standing in an ordinary moment. You are a chosen one standing at the intersection of Chronos and Kairos, at the threshold of a door season that has been approaching since before you had language for what you were waiting for. The door that has been appearing in your dreams, the one you have stood in front of more than once in your waking imagination, the one that was closed in a way that felt like timing rather than refusal. That door is not still coming. It is already here. And the peace you are beginning to feel, even now, even underneath everything that is still unresolved, is the evidence of its presence. What God has appointed, delay cannot cancel, and your appointment is now. Something is shifting right now in 3 specific areas of your life, and I want to name them with enough precision that you feel the truth of it land somewhere concrete, rather than floating past you as a general encouragement. But before I name them, I want to say something about this particular moment in your story. You have just come through an honest acknowledgement of what the waiting has cost you. You have sat in the weight of the real price, the time, the relationships, the career ground, the freedom with your own dreams, the trust in yourself that eroded slowly over years of unanswered questions. You did not skip past that, and I am glad, because the reframe that is coming now will mean something different, something truer and more durable, because you did not rush to it. You earned the right to receive it by being willing to feel the cost first. What is moving in you right now is not a feeling you manufactured to feel better. It is a response to something real that is already in motion. And the three areas where that motion is becoming most specific are the areas that touch the center of your daily lived experience, your inner life, your sense of direction, and your relationship with what is possible for you. The first area that is shifting is your inner world, the noise that has been living at the center of your chest, the low-grade hum of anxiety, of unresolved waiting, of questions that circled without landing. That noise is beginning to change its character. It is not disappearing overnight, and I will not insult your intelligence by suggesting it will, but it is shifting from the kind of noise that feels like static, like interference, like something blocking the signal, to something that feels more like anticipation. There is a difference between those two internal experiences even when they produce similar symptoms on the surface. Anxiety contracts. Anticipation expands. Anxiety closes the chest. Anticipation opens it. What you are beginning to feel, even if you cannot fully name it yet, is the first movement from one to the other. You are going to start waking up differently. Not every morning, not in a linear progression that never dips, but in a general trajectory. Something in your first moments of consciousness is going to begin to shift from dread to something quieter and more open. You will notice it first in small ways. The quality of your first thought in the morning. The way a particular song lands differently than it has before. The moment in an ordinary conversation when something is said that carries more weight than the words themselves, and you find yourself pausing in a way you have not paused in a long time, because something inside you is beginning to listen at a frequency it has not had access to in years. Here is what you should not do in this area. Do not try to accelerate it. Do not treat the returning clarity as a project to be optimized or a state to be performed. The chosen ones who damage their own emerging seasons most often do so by trying to manage the arrival of what they have been waiting for rather than simply receiving it. The inner shift that is beginning in you is not a product of your effort. It is a product of your endurance meeting its appointed moment. Let it arrive at the pace it arrives. Trust that it knows where it is going even when you cannot see the whole shape of it yet. What you can trust in this area is that the return of your own inner voice, the one that has been muffled by the static of a long and heavy season, is real and it is reliable. When it speaks, listen. Not to every passing thought, but to the deep and settled impressions that arrive in the quiet, that do not push or demand but simply present themselves with a clarity that stands out from the surrounding noise. That voice has not abandoned you. It has been waiting for the conditions to be quiet enough to reach you again. The second area that is shifting is your sense of direction and purpose. This is the area where chosen ones most often feel the most confused during a long waiting season, because purpose without a clear path forward feels less like a gift and more like a burden. You have known for a long time that you were made for something specific. The knowing has never entirely left you, even when you tried to talk yourself out of it, even when you offered yourself the reasonable alternative of simply accepting a smaller version of the life you were building. The knowing kept returning. It was inconvenient and persistent, and sometimes felt more like a curse than a calling, because carrying a sense of purpose without visible movement toward it is one of the most disorienting experiences a human being can sustain over time. but the question that has been circling without an answer. The question of what specifically you are supposed to do next, which step to take, which direction to move. That question is about to receive not a dramatic revelation but something more useful. A single clear step. Not the whole staircase. Not the blueprint of the entire building. Just the next step, made visible with a specificity and a clarity that you will recognize immediately as different from the general impressions you have been receiving. When it comes, do not wait for the second step to be visible before you take the first. The chosen ones who move into their purpose most cleanly are the ones who have learned to take the step that is illuminated without demanding that the rest of the path be lit before they move. You have been in a season of seeing almost nothing. The shift that is coming is not going to give you everything at once. It is going to give you enough clarity for the next right action, enough direction for the next honest step. And that is sufficient. That is actually more than sufficient, because a person who has been prepared the way you have been prepared does not need the whole map. They need the next coordinate, and it is coming. What you should not do in this area is compare the shape of your step to the shape of someone else's visible progress. The direction that is opening for you will not look like what is opening for the person standing next to you, because you are not the same person with the same preparation and the same calling. The step that is yours will fit you in a way that no other step could, and the fit itself will be part of how you recognize it. What you can trust in this area is that the clarity is not arbitrary. It has been building in you through every experience of the waiting season, every lesson that felt like loss, every piece of wisdom you acquired by surviving something you were not sure you would survive. The direction that is emerging is not separate from the preparation. It is the product of it. The third area that is shifting is your relationship with resources and opportunity. This is the area that chosen ones are often most afraid to name out loud, because naming it feels presumptuous, feels like claiming something that has not yet been given, feels like the kind of bold declaration that has preceded disappointment before and left marks that are still sensitive. But I want to name it plainly, because plainness is what this moment requires. The season of striving, of pushing against closed doors, of working twice as hard for half the result, of watching resources arrive just barely enough and never quite abundantly, that season is completing its arc. What is coming is not the absence of effort. You will still work. You will still show up. But the quality of the effort is going to change. It is going to begin to feel less like swimming upstream and more like moving with a current that is already flowing in your direction. Opportunities that align with your purpose are going to begin arriving through channels you did not engineer, through connections you did not manufacture, through moments that have the unmistakable quality of being arranged rather than achieved. You are not going to have to fight for everything the way you have been fighting, not because the fighting was wrong. The fighting built the strength that makes you capable of carrying what is coming, but because the season that required that particular kind of effort is ending, and the season that is beginning operates on a different principle. The principle of the chosen one who has been positioned, prepared, and is now being released into the specific territory that was always intended for them. Do not shrink back from receiving. This is the instruction for this area. Do not deflect the opportunity because it feels too large or too sudden or too different from the struggle you have normalized. Do not assume that ease means error, that things coming together means you missed something, that the relief of movement after long stillness is somehow suspicious. Receive what is coming with open hands and with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that it is arriving on time, at the appointed moment, for the person who was made to carry it. Type the words "I am ready" in the comments if these 3 areas landed somewhere real inside you today. You are standing at a threshold right now. I do not mean that metaphorically, in the loose way that phrase gets used when someone wants to sound profound without saying anything specific. I mean it with the full weight of everything we have walked through together in this message. You are standing at an actual threshold, the boundary line between the person the long season made you and the person the new season is calling you to become. And I want to give you a name for who that person is, because chosen ones who enter new seasons without a name for what they are becoming often drift back toward the identity the old season assigned them, simply because the old identity is familiar even when it no longer fits. The name I want to give you today is this: you are a cycle breaker. Not in the shallow sense of someone who simply does things differently from the generation before them. A cycle breaker, in the fullest meaning of that identity, is someone whose endurance through a long and specific season of difficulty has equipped them to interrupt patterns in their own life, in their family line, in the communities they move through, that would have continued indefinitely without the presence of someone who was willing to stay in the breaking long enough to come out carrying something new on the other side. You did not just survive your waiting season, you absorbed it. You were changed by it at a cellular level, at the level of how you see and how you respond and what you are capable of holding without being destroyed by it. And that change is not just personal. It has a radius. The people who come into contact with the version of you that is emerging from this season are going to encounter something they have not encountered before, something that will interrupt the cycles they have been running on without realizing they had any other option. That is not a small thing. That is not a flattering description designed to make you feel temporarily better about a hard season. That is a functional description of what a chosen one who has been through what you have been through actually carries when they step into their next season. You carry a pattern-interrupting presence. You carry the evidence, not just in your words, but in the actual texture of who you are. That the cycle can be broken, that the pattern does not have to continue, that a different outcome is not just theoretically possible, but actually available to the people around you. And let me be specific about what that pattern-interrupting presence actually looks like in practice, because chosen ones need concrete pictures, not just elevated concepts. It looks like being the first person in a generational line to choose a different response when an old wound gets pressed. Not because you have no reaction, but because the preparation of your waiting season has created enough interior space between stimulus and response that you can feel the old pattern activating and choose something different before it runs its course automatically. That is not a small capacity. That is something most people never develop because they were never taken through the specific interior furnace that develops it. It looks like being the person in a room who names what everyone else is feeling but no one is saying. Not to create drama, not to be the one who always surfaces the difficult thing, but because your frequency, elevated by years of deep interior processing, picks up on the undercurrents of a space with a sensitivity that is now a gift, rather than the liability it felt like during the years when you did not know what to do with it. It looks like being the person whose presence creates permission for others to be more honest, more open, more willing to believe in something larger than the evidence currently in front of them. Not because you preach at people or perform your faith for an audience, but because the quality of what you carry, the specific combination of having been through the fire and having come out with something rather than nothing, is something people feel before you say a single word about it. You are a cycle breaker, and the cycle you are breaking is larger than your own biography. Now I want to guide you through something. I want you to take 60 seconds and allow yourself to actually picture what I am about to describe. Not to analyze it, not to evaluate whether it is realistic, simply to let the image form and to notice what happens in your body when it does. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, an actual doorway set into a wall that stretches in both directions as far as you can see. Behind you is everything you have already lived, the years of the waiting season, the cost, the grief, the strands of experience that were being braided into the cord of who you are. You do not need to look back at it in detail. You can simply be aware that it is there, that it is the ground you are standing on, that every hard year and every faithfully endured moment is literally beneath your feet, holding you up, giving you the elevation from which you are now able to see the threshold in front of you. Now look down at your hands. They are not empty. They are holding something that was not visible to you during the long years of the waiting season, the accumulated weight of everything you learned, everything you survived, everything you chose when you could have chosen differently. It does not look like much from the outside. It does not announce itself with obvious impressiveness, but it is dense with a kind of value that only comes from being forged rather than purchased, earned through presence rather than acquired through strategy. And in front of you is the doorway. It is not dramatic. It does not glow or vibrate or announce itself with any of the theatrical qualities that the word breakthrough usually conjures. It is simply open, quietly, specifically, deliberately open. And the light on the other side of it is the particular quality of light that belongs to mornings not blinding, not harsh, but clear and new and full of a promise that does not need to shout, because it is confident enough to simply be present. You are not almost at the threshold. You are not approaching it from a distance and hoping you will reach it someday. You are standing in it right now. Your feet are at the exact line where behind and ahead meet. And the only thing left to do, the only thing that has ever been left to do at a threshold, is to take the step. Notice what you feel in your body right now as you hold that image. If you feel a warmth somewhere, that is recognition. If you feel a tightening, that is the part of you that has been braced for so long that the prospect of release is almost more disorienting than the tension itself. If you feel something that resembles the very early edge of tears, that is not sadness. That is the specific emotion that arrives when something you have been believing for a very long time finally becomes real enough to touch. And if you feel, underneath all of that, a quiet and almost imperceptible sense of something settling, something in you that has been unsettled for years beginning to find its footing, then you are feeling the confirmation of everything this message has been moving toward. That settling is not complacency. It is not the resignation of someone who has stopped hoping. It is the deep interior exhale of a chosen one, who has finally arrived at the moment they were being prepared for, and whose body, in its wisdom, knows it before the mind has finished processing it. You are a cycle breaker. You are standing at the threshold of the season that justifies every year of the preparation. And you are ready, not in the sense that you feel ready, not in the sense that everything has been resolved and all the questions have been answered, but in the deeper sense that you have been made ready by what you have been through, shaped into the exact person this exact moment requires. Before I release you from this image, I want to speak a few specific words over you. Not as a religious performance, not as empty ritual, but as the kind of honest, specific blessing that a chosen one deserves to receive at a moment like this one. May the clarity that has been forming in you during the silence of the waiting season now begin to speak in a language that your waking life can hear and act on. May the relationships that belong to your next season arrive with a naturalness and a rightness that makes the loneliness of the previous season make sense in retrospect. May the opportunities that are aligned with your purpose begin to surface in places you did not think to look, through channels you did not think to open, in ways that confirm rather than contradict the calling you have been carrying. May the version of you that walks through this threshold carry with it none of the shame of the waiting season and all of the wisdom of it. May you find that the things the long season stripped away were not the things you actually needed, and that what remained after the stripping is exactly the core that the next season was designed to be built upon. May you discover, sooner than you expect, that the people and places and opportunities that belong to this new season recognize you, not the performed version of you, not the guarded version, not the version that learned to want things quietly, but the actual you, the full you, the you that the preparation was protecting all along. May you receive what is coming with open hands. May you resist the reflex to shrink from it because abundance feels unfamiliar after a long season of scarcity. May you walk through the threshold in front of you with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that the preparation was real, that the promise is real, and that the person standing at this doorway is exactly the person who was meant to be standing here at exactly this moment. You are a cycle breaker. You are seen. You are not alone. And what is ahead of you is not a reward for your suffering. It is the fulfillment of a purpose that was written before the suffering began, that the suffering served, and that your endurance has now made you more than ready to carry. Step forward. The threshold is already beneath your feet. You have been in the receiving position long enough. It is time to talk about what you actually do with what is coming, not in a distant, theoretical sense, not in the language of someday and eventually, but in the language of right now, this week, today, before this Sunday is over. Because one of the most consistent patterns I have observed in chosen ones who have been through long waiting seasons is that when the shift finally begins, they do not know what to do with their own hands. They have become so accustomed to the posture of enduring that the posture of moving forward feels foreign, almost presumptuous, like they need someone to give them explicit permission before they take a step that is already theirs to take. Consider this your permission, and more than permission, consider it an instruction. There are 3 areas where your action in the coming days will either open or narrow the space that is being created for you right now. Not because your effort earns what is coming. We have already established that what is coming is appointed, not achieved. But because a chosen one who has been prepared the way you have been prepared is not a passive recipient. You are a participant in your own unfolding. And participation looks like specific, grounded, present tense action in the 3 areas that matter most right now. The first area is your relationships. And the action required here is not dramatic. It is not a confrontation, not a grand gesture, not a wholesale clearing of everyone in your life in a single sweeping movement. The action required is discernment, applied quietly and consistently over the coming days. There are people in your life right now who belong to your next season. You may already have a sense of who some of them are. People whose presence leaves you more energized rather than more depleted. People whose conversation moves in a direction that feels aligned with where you are going rather than anchored in where you have been. People who seem to see the version of you that is emerging rather than only recognizing the version of you that has been surviving. Move toward those people. Not urgently, not with the desperation of someone who has been lonely for a long time and is now overcorrecting, but with the deliberate warmth of someone who recognizes a divine appointment and honors it by showing up fully. And then there are people who belong to the chapter that is closing. You already know who some of them are too. Not because they are bad people, not because the history you share with them does not matter, but because the frequency at which you are now operating and the frequency at which those relationships have been running are no longer the same, and the gap is becoming impossible to bridge without one of you compromising something essential. You do not need to end those relationships with drama or with declarations. You simply need to stop pouring energy into maintaining connections that the season itself is naturally releasing. Let them thin gracefully. Release them with gratitude for what they were, without forcing them to become something they are no longer able to be. The practical action for this area is simple. Identify one person this week who belongs to your next season and reach out to them with no agenda other than genuine connection. Not to network, not to position yourself, not to explain where you are in your journey, simply to be present with someone whose presence belongs to where you are going. That single action, taken with genuine intention, opens more than you can currently see from where you are standing. The second area is your purpose, and the action required here is even simpler than it sounds, which is why most chosen ones overlook it entirely in favor of something that feels more significant. The action is this: write down the one thing that you know you are supposed to do that you have been postponing because you have been waiting for conditions to be more favorable. Not the whole vision, just the one next step that you have been aware of and have been stepping around for weeks or months or possibly years. The one thing that, every time you get quiet enough to hear your own interior voice, surfaces with a persistence that you cannot entirely explain or dismiss. Write it down, not in the abstract specifically, not pursue my calling, but rather the actual concrete action that represents the next honest movement toward your calling. Not improve my relationships, but the specific conversation you have been meaning to have, or the specific person you have been meaning to contact, or the specific boundary you have been meaning to establish. The specificity is the point. Chosen ones in transition often stay in the language of the general, because the general does not require them to commit to anything that can be evaluated. The specific does, and the specific is where the movement actually happens. Once you have written it down, do one part of it before this Sunday ends. Not the whole thing, one part. One email drafted if not yet sent. One phone number looked up if not yet called. One page written if not yet finished. One conversation begun if not yet completed. The momentum of a single concrete action taken in alignment with your purpose creates a neurological and spiritual shift that no amount of intention without action can produce. Your brain begins to reorganize itself around the evidence that you are someone who moves, and that reorganization changes what becomes visible to you in the hours and days that follow. The third area is your relationship with resources and opportunity, and the action required here is perhaps the most counterintuitive of the three, which is why I want to name it as directly as possible. Stop pushing. Not permanently, movement matters, and we have just established that. But there is a specific kind of effortful striving that chosen ones in transition engage in that actually narrows rather than opens the space for what is coming. It is the striving that comes from scarcity, from the fear that if you do not force the outcome it will not arrive, from the deeply conditioned belief that nothing good comes without maximum effort applied in the direction of the desired result. That kind of striving made sense in the season you are leaving, where endurance required everything you had, but it does not belong in the season you are entering. The action for this area is to identify one place in your life where you have been pushing against resistance with diminishing returns, one door you have been knocking on that has shown no sign of opening despite sustained effort, and to deliberately, consciously, with full intention rather than defeated resignation, release it for 7 days. Not forever. 7 days. Step back from the pushing, open your hands, and create space for something to arrive through a channel you were too busy pushing to notice. This is not passivity. This is the specific kind of active receptivity that the door season requires. The opportunities that belong to your appointed time do not typically arrive through the doors you have been battering. They arrive through doors that have been quietly opening in your peripheral vision while your attention was consumed with the one that was not moving. 7 days of releasing the push creates enough interior spaciousness for you to begin to see what has been opening while you were not looking. And in those 7 days, return to the 7 minutes. The practice from part 3, the intentional silence, the deliberate stillness, the 7 minutes of letting your brain return to the frequency it was built to operate at. Make that your daily anchor during this transition. Not as a ritual, not as a performance of spiritual discipline, but as the practical neurological reset that your mind needs in order to perceive what is already present and moving in your life at a level that survival frequency thinking cannot access. The genius wave exists precisely for this moment in a chosen one's journey. The moment when the preparation is complete and the movement is beginning. When what is needed is not more endurance but more receptivity, more clarity, more access to the gamma frequency where insight and direction, and the specific kind of integrative thinking that turns appointed moments into visible breakthrough actually lives. If it met you somewhere in this message and you know it is a yes, the link is waiting for you in the pinned comment. $39, 90 days to experience it fully. And if it does not deliver what I have described, every dollar returns to you without question. But whether or not the genius wave is part of your next 7 days, the 3 actions are: 1 relationship moved toward, 1 specific step written down and partially taken, 1 door released from the grip of effortful pushing to make space for what is arriving through a different channel entirely. You have been prepared for this. You have been braided into the strength that this season requires. And the movement that begins this Sunday, quiet, specific, grounded, and real, is the first visible expression of everything the long season was building toward. Type the words "I receive" in the comments if you are ready to move. I want to stay with you for just a few more minutes before this message ends. Not because there is more information to deliver, not because there is another concept to introduce or another framework to hand you, but because you showed up today. You stayed. You sat through the hard parts, the honest acknowledgement of what the waiting has cost, the weight of the years that did not produce what you were believing for, the uncomfortable precision of being named so specifically that there was nowhere to hide from the truth of your own story. You stayed through all of it. And that matters more than you may currently understand. Most people do not stay. Most people encounter something that gets close enough to the real thing, and they find a reason to exit before it lands fully. They get distracted or uncomfortable, or the surface layer of the message does not immediately match the aesthetic they were expecting, and they move on before the substance has a chance to reach them. You did not do that. You are still here. And the fact that you are still here at this specific moment in this specific message on this specific Sunday is not a coincidence. It is the continuation of the same pattern that brought you here in the first place. Something in you that knows how to recognize what it actually needs, even when it cannot fully articulate why. I want to say something to the part of you that almost did not show up today. There was a version of this Sunday where you did not find this message, where the noise won, where the plans won, where the pull toward distraction or social obligation or simple exhaustion won, and you moved through today without this specific encounter. I do not know how close that version came to being the one that happened, but I know that it did not happen. You are here. Something in you chose this over everything else that was available, and that choice was not random. It was the intelligence of a spirit that knows what season it is in, and what it needs in order to step across the threshold that is right in front of it. You are not alone in what you are carrying. I want that to reach you not as a comfort phrase, not as a well-intentioned platitude that sounds good but dissolves under the pressure of a hard Monday morning, but as a factual statement about the reality of this moment. All across the world right now, other chosen ones are receiving versions of this same message. They are sitting in cars and quiet rooms and borrowed corners of busy houses. They are in cities whose names you will never know, speaking languages that would sound foreign to your ear, carrying stories that would take hours to tell and that would feel, if you heard them, strangely familiar in their essential shape. The specifics differ. The underneath is the same. The long waiting season. The questions that circled without landing, the grief for a life that has not yet arrived, the persistence of a knowing that refuses to be argued away no matter how reasonable the arguments are, the Sunday that felt different before they could explain why. You are in a room with all of them right now, a room with no walls and no ceiling, full of people who are standing at their own versions of the threshold you are standing at, who are feeling in their own chests the first movements of the exhale that you are feeling in yours. You are not a singular anomaly, a special case of someone who waited longer or harder or more faithfully than the system could accommodate. You are part of a generation of chosen ones who have been in preparation simultaneously, who are emerging into their appointed seasons at roughly the same time, and whose collective emergence is not accidental. It is coordinated. It is purposeful. And the fact that you found each other, even through the improbable medium of a video on a screen on a Sunday that you almost spent differently, is part of the coordination. I want to give you one final practice before I release you into the rest of your Sunday. And I want you to actually do it, not just receive it as a concept. Picture yourself standing at the threshold one more time. You have been here before in this message. You know the image. The doorway, the wall stretching in both directions, the clear morning light on the other side. But this time I want you to notice something that we did not focus on before. At your feet, right at the line of the threshold, there is a pile of things. It is not dramatic in appearance. It does not look like much from a distance. But as you look closer, you recognize the individual pieces. The specific worry you have been carrying about a situation that has not resolved. The particular shame that attached itself to a season of apparent failure. The version of yourself that learned to stay small because small was safe. The grief for the relationships that thinned and the time that passed, and the version of the future that did not arrive on schedule. The self-doubt that moved in during the long years and made itself comfortable in rooms of your interior life that it was never invited into. All of it is there at your feet, and the instruction, the only instruction for this moment, is to leave it there, not to resolve it before you step forward, not to carry it through the threshold with you in case you need it later, not to spend another season negotiating with it or trying to convert it into something more useful, simply to leave it at the threshold, to step forward and let it stay on the side where it belongs, which is behind you in the season that is ending, in the chapter that has already been written. You do not need it where you are going. Everything it taught you is already inside you. The lessons are embedded. The wisdom is yours. The strength that the hard years built is in your bones, and it is coming with you. But the weight of it, the heaviness of carrying it forward into a season that was never designed to hold it, that you can set down. Right here, right now, at this threshold, before you take the next step. Leave it there and step forward. If this message reached you somewhere real today, if something in it named what you have been carrying, if it gave language to a season you have been living without adequate words for, if it sat with you in the hard parts instead of rushing past them, if it left you feeling even slightly less alone in the weight of what you have been holding, would you do something for me that costs you nothing but a few seconds of your time? Like this video. Not for the number, not for the algorithm, not for me, so that another chosen one who is walking into their Monday without anyone to name it for them has a chance of finding it. Share it with one person who you sense is in their own long waiting season, who needs to hear that they have not been overlooked, that they have been positioned, that the preparation is real and the promise is still intact, and the door that has been appearing in their dreams is not a taunt, but a Kairos appointment arriving on time. Subscribe if you want to stay in this conversation, if you want to keep receiving the kind of honesty that does not rush past the hard parts, or sell you a version of faith that cannot survive contact with a real Monday morning. And if the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, if the description of what it does, of restoring the frequency that the long season suppressed, of returning you to the gamma clarity that chosen ones carry when they are fully alive and fully aligned. If that landed as a yes somewhere inside you, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. $39, 90 days to experience it, and if it does not deliver, every dollar returns to you. No pressure, no urgency beyond what you feel in your own spirit. simply an open door for the one who knows it is theirs. You came here today carrying something heavy. I hope you leave carrying something different. Not lighter necessarily. The calling of a chosen one is never light, but clearer, more named, more accompanied, more certain that the season you are in has a purpose that the surface of it does not yet fully reveal. You are a chosen one. You have always been a chosen one. And this Sunday, something in that identity became more real, more accessible, more yours than it was when you woke up this morning. That is not nothing, that is everything. There is one more thing I want to say, and I want to say it quietly, without ceremony, without any of the rhetorical weight that has carried the rest of this message. You are going to be okay. Not in the vague, dismissive way that phrase usually lands when someone says it to fill a silence. In the specific, grounded, evidence-based way that I mean it after walking with you through everything this message contained. You have already survived every hard thing that tried to stop you from reaching this moment. You have already demonstrated, through the sheer fact of your continued presence and your continued willingness to believe, that you are someone who does not give up on what matters. That does not change when the message ends. That is not a temporary condition that exists only while the audio is playing. That is who you are, and who you are is already enough for where you are going. Step forward, you are ready, and heaven has already gone ahead of you to prepare the way. Go well, chosen one. The best of your story is still being written.